When I was young, I used to think that sexual fetishes were no big deal. Yeah, I thought to myself that, if somebody wants to indulge in some sexual fetish, whatsoever that sexual fetish might be, so what? If it doesn't harm anybody, if it doesn't harm, or let me phrase it, if it doesn't harm somebody who doesn't consent to it, it's no big deal. If everybody there participating in the fetish, whatsoever that fetish may be, is consenting to it and they're adults, and they know more or less what they're doing, live and let live. That was my thinking. I realize now that that mode of thinking is wrong. I think that sexual fetishes are a very, very bad thing and that you should refrain from them. You should refrain from them and channel your energy and imagination in some other direction. That's what I think. And let me explain why. You see, there's nothing wrong with having a healthy sexual appetite. Perfectly normal, okay? A healthy sexual appetite, it's part of life. It's one of the more enjoyable parts of life. Yeah, fucking is fun. Yeah, so I'm not against fucking. Okay, I just want to make that really, really clear. But what I am opposed to is sexual fetishes that start to demand a lot of imagination, a lot of ingenuity. And it's not even an issue of pain, either receiving pain or inflicting pain or anything like that. What it is that, see, sexual fetishes begin to take over your life. And I've seen this in a number of people, okay? I myself have never participated in any kind of organized sexual fetishes, right? But I have seen people who have. And what I've noticed is that their participation in sexual fetishes tends to suck all of their energy out of their lives and into the fetish. And by doing so, they begin to neglect very important aspects of their lives. And that's the problem. See, if the sexual fetish didn't really interfere with the rest of their lives, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But this is the point. You see, a sexual fetish tends to demand a lot of attention. Because unlike just regular fucking, right? When you're just having sex with some girl, you're beyond getting her into bed, you're not thinking a hell of a lot about it. But sexual fetishes, by their very nature, require a lot of imagination, spending a lot of imagination, dreaming up scenarios and dreaming up the conditions in order to fulfill the sexual fetish, whatsoever it may be. It might be perfectly innocent or very perverse, but it doesn't matter. The point is, see, it requires a lot of energy and a lot of thought to be dedicated to the sexual fetish. And this is the problem. See, because all that energy, all that thought, all that potentially money and time spent to prepare for the sexual fetish, it's time and energy and money that you are taking away from the other more important aspects of your life. The other things where you need to be on the ball, right? And because of this greater investment insofar as time and money and energy goes into the fetish, these other aspects of your life, your work, your family life, your friendships, this, that, the other, well, they begin to become neglected by the person who's in the sexual fetish. I knew a guy in New York about 20 years ago who got into the furry thing in a big way back in the day. I thought it was just at first screamingly funny. I just thought it was weird, right? But, I thought nothing of it. But the thing that happened was that this guy, he started to neglect his business. He was a freelance photographer, a fairly successful one, at least at first, okay? Now, this guy had gotten into photography because, like most straight photographers, he wanted to get near models, right? And he wound up banging a lot of models. But from there, it sort of like evolved into this furry fetish, right? And he started getting into the whole furry thing. And because of it, he started neglecting his job as a photographer, his business, right? Because he didn't have a job. It wasn't a 9-to-5 thing. He just picked up gigs with successful fashion magazines. I mean, he was a successful guy. But his career started to decay because more and more of his intention went into the fetish. And he found this whole sub-community involved in this fetish. And that's where things really started to go south. Yeah, because what happened was that, see, all these people sort of like reinforced his idea that it was perfectly fine to be in this fetish and to be spending all this time in this fetish. Oh yeah, I mean, they were other furries. And of course they were going to say that it's wonderful to be a furry and that you should, devote more of your time and effort and energy into the furry community. Yeah, of course they were going to tell him this, right? And the photographer went along with this. And what happened, of course, is that he got deeper and deeper into the fetish. And what happened to his business? It started going down and down and down. And what happened was that, he's got to a point where he started all of a sudden not being able to afford his apartment. And he lost his apartment, as a matter of fact. He lost his apartment because he couldn't afford the rent, because he'd allowed his business as a photographer to sink. He'd neglected his business so badly that he was no longer generating the income necessary to survive in New York. And what happened to this photographer? He wound up moving back in with his parents. And he was fucking 42 years old. Yeah. After, taking... he actually took the cover shot of a Vogue magazine. I saw it. It was for real. Yeah, I saw the fucking credit. His name was there. He took that shot. Of course, I'm not going to tell you which edition of Vogue, right? But the thing is, he took that cover shot of Vogue, he showed it to me, and it was like, I think it was like the 98, and by 2001, he was living in Massachusetts. Yeah, in 3 years, he went from the pinnacle of his profession to being broke and living at home. And it wasn't drugs, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't bad business decisions. No, it was a stupid fucking fetish that ruined him. And you can say, quite reasonably, you can say, well, he couldn't handle his fetish. It got away from him. Just like, he couldn't handle his drugs or he couldn't handle his booze. That's a fair argument, okay? Because like for instance, my case, I did a lot of drugs in my time, yeah? I mean, pot and shrooms and acid and some coke, right? Never did heroin, never did meth. But of the more standard drugs, I did a lot of them, but never had a problem with them. And now I'm 51. I haven't smoked pot in 11 years, 12 years. And insofar as any other drug, I haven't, because it's just childish things. It didn't rule my life. Ditto with say casinos. Love going to casinos, but no big deal. I can handle it. Ditto with booze, right? I can handle this kind of shit. Perhaps if I were involved in some fetish, I could handle it and I wouldn't wreck my life, right? But I guess that sort of like proves the point that sexual fetishes are a lot like alcohol and drugs and gambling, They are vices. A vice that can pull you down. And if you have the kind of personality that is not addicted to something, maybe you can just take it and leave it, right? You can take it up, enjoy it for a while, and then leave it behind, and no harm done, right? But if you know yourself and you realize that you're not that guy, don't get involved in it. If you realize that you can start getting addicted to drugs if you take drugs, don't take drugs. Ditto with alcohol, ditto with gambling, ditto with sexual fetishes, right? I mean, obviously people enjoy themselves in these sexual fetishes, or else people wouldn't do it, obviously, right? But you have to understand whether you are of a personality such that you can slide into this. And this demands self-knowledge on your part. You have to figure out what kind of a man you are. Are you a man who can handle his highs, who can handle his booze, who can handle his gambling, who can handle his sexual fetishes? Or are you a guy who will get sucked into the vortex and not be able to recover? Because if you're that kind of a guy, then you have to know yourself and know, no, I'm not going to do it. If you can handle it, great. Go ahead, try it out, I suppose. But in my own case, I don't see any real upside. And here's something else. Sexual fetishes might be fun. I mean, obviously they must be fun, right? Or else people wouldn't do them. But it trivializes sex. It not only trivializes sex, but, it's sort of like the alcoholic who, or the guy who likes his booze, who cannot really enjoy himself unless he's had half a bottle of scotch. Yeah, I would suspect that a guy who's seriously into a sexual fetish cannot just enjoy regular sex. He gets inured to regular sex. And I think that that's a bad thing. Yeah. Why do I think it's a bad thing? Because a sexual fetish, whatsoever the sexual fetish may be, ultimately is not going to be a healthy way to bond with a woman. Because ultimately, the sexual act is for procreation. And ultimately, what gives a man happiness, and certainly gives him direction and gives him focus, is having a family of his own. A family of his own is a great way to get a guy to focus and achieve great things. Because once he has a family, once he has that responsibility and knows that he can't just blow it off, well, then he's going to get his shit together. He's going to get his head on straight, right? And a key component of a family is a healthy sexual relationship with a woman. But if you are into sexual fetishes, it's going to be very difficult for you to have any kind of healthy sexual interaction with a woman. On the contrary, your sexual interactions will be dependent on the fetish. And you will not necessarily reject, but look askance at any woman who does not want to participate in your sexual fetish. And, sexual fetishes being what they are, that is, they appeal to a very vanishingly small minority of people. What will happen, of course, is that, the pool of prospective mates will become severely diminished if you indulge in your sexual fetish. I don't think that that's a good thing. On the contrary, I think that, limiting yourself that much for the sake of a sexual fetish is the same as, limiting yourself insofar as your mates because you're only going to be dating girls who like to do heroin. Yeah? It's not a healthy thing. It's not a healthy thing, and if at the least you can say that because of this, you can have a very, very reduced pool of possible mates, right? But at worst, what will happen is that the sexual fetish will consume the relationship that you have with a woman, and you will not have any kind of healthy sexual relationship, a healthy emotional relationship. On the contrary, the relationship with the woman will be dominated by the fetish, and you will lose sight of the reason that you have a sexual relationship. Sexual fetishes, sexual decadences, and degeneracies, they are undeniably attractive. Of course. I mean, there is something that pulls at us, because sometimes we have, deep and rather disturbing desires. And especially in this current deregulated sexual marketplace, this no judgment environment that we're living in, we are practically encouraged to try out these sexual fetishes and see if we enjoy them. But I think it's a bad thing, ultimately. I think it's a bad thing, it's a destructive thing, and I think that in the long run and the short run, nothing good can come of it. I hope I've explained why.